These German cutlets, better known as schnitzel, has become one of our favorite foods. This easy to prepare dish of gently pounded pork that's breaded and fried until golden brown is just so good. In addition, I think I'm going to add a classic mushroom sauce to it, and who knows, maybe a side dish to round out one dang tasty meal. The first thing we need to do though is knock out some prep. Sound good? Let's cook. All right, my homies, we're going to start off with that pork, and you're going to have some options. You can use boneless pork chops or boneless pork steaks. Now, I prefer the pork steaks because they have more intermuscular fat and are more tender and flavorful. However, center cut pork chops are still delicious. Now, what you can do if you cannot find the pork steaks is get a cut from that pork loin that's closer to the shoulder blade that will have more intermuscular fat and therefore be more tender and more flavorful. Now I have 4 total cuts that are in between 4 and 6 ounces each, and what we want to do is gently pound these out. So what we want to do is place the pork in between 2 pieces of plastic wrap, or you can use parchment paper or even a plastic bag. Once the pork is in there, I'm going to use a mallet to gently pound it until it is about a 1/4 inch thick. Now as soon as the mallet makes contact with the pork, I'm also pulling it out to help spread out that pork a little bit so it isn't mashed just straight down in one area. And the absolute thickest you would want to be is a 1/2 inch, but the thinner, the better. And if you don't have a mallet, you can absolutely use a saucepot. I've done it a million times and it works perfectly. Once they are all pounded out, we're going to set them to the side on a plate. Now let's set up our standard breading procedure. I have 1 cup of all-purpose flour. You can put this in a shallow wide bowl, a pie tin, or a cake tin like this. Now you have 2 options here. Season the pork ahead of time or season the breading procedure at every process, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to add in roughly 2 teaspoons of coarse salt and fresh cracked black pepper. I'm going to mix it until it is combined, then set it to the side. In a separate cake tin, I'm going to add in 4 large eggs. Then I'm going to pour in about a 1/3 cup of heavy whipping cream. You could also substitute with 1/2 and 1/2 or milk. Now I'm adding in about a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, gonna add some delicious savory flavors in there. Then I'm gonna zest in a 1/2 lemon to help brighten up this dish with some nice clean acid flavors. Season it with about 2 teaspoons of coarse salt and about a 1/2 teaspoon of fresh cracked black pepper. Then just using a fork or a whisk, mix it together until the eggs are fully broke down and mixed in with all the other ingredients. Then last but not least, I have 2 cups of regular breadcrumbs. I've got a great recipe on my website if you just want to learn to make these from home using leftover bread. We're of course going to season it with another 2 teaspoons of coarse salt and fresh cracked black pepper, and I'm going to give it a mix until combined. Now I know this may seem like a lot of salt and pepper, however, not all of these ingredients are going to be used on the pork when they go into each procedure, but I want enough in there to make sure it is seasoned. And now to get to breading, Chef Dr. Billy Parisi is in the house, but you know what? First, let's have some good time management here. Let's heat up our oil in the meantime. So let's bring our fat over to the cooktop. I have a large 12-inch non-stick skillet. You could use stainless steel, carbon steel, or even a cast iron skillet here. Now, classically, ghee or clarified butter would be the main fat used, but hey, those are expensive. So I'm going to add in a good amount of a neutral flavored oil like avocado oil. Then I'm going to add in 3 tablespoons of ghee, which is clarified butter where the milk fats have been cooked a little further to add some nice toasted nut flavors, and this should be plenty to flavor up our oil. I'm going to turn the heat up to low medium, and in the meantime, get back to breading. In the meantime, let's go back to our breading procedure, and for a little chef tip, we're going to use 1 hand for dry and 1 hand for wet ingredients. So let's grab 1 piece of thinly pounded out pork and dredge it in the flour, ensuring it is completely covered in the flour on all sides. Take the time to do this. Flip it back and forth if you must, but you should not see any raw pork. It should be completely covered in flour. Then we're going to knock off any excess flour and transfer it right over to our egg wash. Then using our other hand, we are going to coat it on all sides in that mixture, making sure it is again completely covered. Shake off any excess egg wash, then transfer over to our seasoned up breadcrumbs, and then going back to your other hand, we want to take the time to coat this completely, making sure the breadcrumbs are over every little square centimeter of our pounded out pork. Now the reason I use 2 different hands for dry and wet is because if I use the same fingers for every single procedure, I'm literally going to have breaded up hands. And sorry, I just hate that. You also may want to shake the pan a little bit to help bring the breadcrumbs over top of the pork to coat it. This looks fantastic. We're just going to set these to the side on a sheet tray lined with parchment paper and repeat the process until all the pork is done. And these can stand by for about 30 minutes total before they need to be fried. First and foremost, the number one reason breading falls off of pork is because your oil is not hot enough. So you want to make sure it's around 350 degrees. If you don't have a thermometer, add a little breadcrumb in there. If it fries like this, we're good to go. Now you're going to need to cook these in batches, but it's totally fine because the pork will hold well. We are going to cook this first for 2 to 3 minutes or until it becomes golden brown on that bottom side. After that amount of time, let's give it a flip. You see how it's nice and golden brown around the outside, but in the inside, it still has that light brown color. Once flipped, we are going to baste it. You can use a spoon or carefully use your tongs. Don't scrape the bottom of that nonstick skillet and continue to baste it while it cooks on the other side for 2 to 3 minutes. This will ensure the pork is cooked while browning up every little square centimeter. Now to me, the darker brown, the more flavor. If you like a little bit lighter brown, no problem, just back off about 30 seconds to 1 minute per side. And once they are done cooking, I'm just going to set them to the side on a rack over a sheet tray lined with parchment paper to drain off any excess oil. And then just repeat the process until all the schnitzel is cooked. Now here's another great trick. If you want to ensure all of these are warm when you're ready to serve it, or if you're going to make something in the meantime and you need to keep them warm, just place them in the oven at very low temperatures on a middle rack in between 180 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. They'll remain perfectly crispy and won't overcook in here for up to 30 minutes. So these schnitzel are finished. You can serve them as is with a side of lemon wedge and parsley. Boom, done and delicious. However, I said I want to serve this up with a sauce. So I want to make a classic creamy mushroom sauce, which will take it from schnitzel to Jaeger schnitzel. Now, I can't even say the word Jaeger without gagging or throwing up in my mouth a little bit, thinking back to my BC days back in college of Jägermeister. Well, this is not that. But Jaeger does mean hunters. So this means hunter's cutlets. The main ingredient, mushrooms. What else is that? Remember cacciatore? What's a main ingredient in there? Mushrooms. What does cacciatore mean? Hunters. You seeing the trend there? Awesome. All right, let's make the sauce. I have 2 cups each of button mushrooms and baby bella mushrooms, and then I have 1 cup of oyster mushrooms. Now to remove any excess dirt or unwanted particles, just give them a quick wipe down with a damp cloth. Now for slicing the baby bellas or the buttons, make 1 small slice, roll it over. See how it doesn't rock back and forth? This helps to stabilize it. Then thinly slice it all the way through. Continue the process with the rest of the mushrooms. Now for the oyster mushrooms, I just slice off the end where all the stems meet. Now you can save those in the freezer and use them in stock. Then for the actual mushroom themselves, I just tear them into smaller bite-sized pieces. Set all the mushrooms to the side in a bowl. Then I have 1 small yellow onion. You could use a white, red, or sweet. Slice off the end, slice it in half, remove that outside peel, and then give it a small dice. Now you're most likely going to need to discard that darkened oil that you cooked the schnitzel in and replace it with 3 tablespoons of fresh neutral flavored oil or ghee. We're going to crank the heat on to high, and once it's smoking, we're going to add in the onions and the mushrooms. Just going to use my hand to flatten it out a little bit, then give it a quick season of coarse salt, about a half teaspoon to help draw out some moisture so they caramelize quicker. We are going to saute these for in between 6 and 8 minutes. You want these mushrooms and onions to be nice and golden brown, and I'm telling you, once mushrooms become brown like this, they take on a whole new flavor, and are they so delicious. So take the time to do this. And once they're at this stage, we are going to add in 2.5 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Then we're going to mix it in just until combined. This is going to help create a roux to thicken up our sauce. And for that liquid, I'm adding in 2 cups of good chicken stock. Got a great homemade recipe if you want to check that out. Then I'm adding in 1 cup of heavy whipping cream. Now cream is the best, but you could also use half and half. Then we're just going to continue to cook it over high heat just until it becomes a boil. Then we're going to cook it over low to medium heat for 4 to 5 minutes, or until it becomes a thicker sauce in a nappe consistency, or can completely coat the back of a spoon. You do not want this to be too thick. You do not want it to be too thin. But if you follow this recipe, it will be perfect every time. Now to finish it up, I'm going to season with a little bit of coarse salt and fresh cracked black pepper, and for a surprise, just a pinch of ground cumin. Now, I saw this in my research for Jaeger Schnitzel, and I love the earthy tones it adds to this sauce, so I highly recommend it. Then, of course, last but not least, we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of finely minced fresh parsley, just for some nice green, fresh tones. Going to mix it until combined and give it a taste. What else does it need? Salt or pepper? You be the judge. Now, because I always get the question, well, what does this go well with? A super classic German side dish is braised red cabbage. Now, this is something I used to actually make when I was a sous chef at a restaurant called Cardwell's. It was part of a vegetable medley, but I always loved that deep purple color on that big white plate. Always looked beautiful, always delicious. Here's how you make it. All right, let's make this as quick as possible. I'm going to thinly julienne 1 red onion. Then taking a thicker piece, I'm going to add 4 cloves to it. This is going to help so that it doesn't get lost in my red cabbage and makes it easier to fish out. Then in a large rondeau pot over medium heat, I'm going to add in a 1/4 cup of rendered pork lard, or you can use bacon fat or oil. Once it's heated up, let's add in the onions. I'm going to season it with a little bit of salt to help draw out any moisture and saute it for 3 to 4 minutes until it becomes lightly browned like this. Then turn the heat down to low medium, and while stirring occasionally, cook it for an additional 10 to 12 minutes or until they are deep, dark, caramelized brown. In the meantime, we're going to quickly prep up 1 head of red cabbage, slice it in half, quarter it, and then remove that core. Then I'm going to thinly julienne it on a mandolin. You know my rule, once you get nervous slicing, stop, because that's when accidents happen. Set this to the side, and then I have 2 Granny Smith apples. Any sour apples will work. We're going to peel them, slice around the core, and then thinly julienne it, keeping it with that same cut consistency as the cabbage and onions. Speaking of onions, let's go back over, have a look, and add our apples right to it. We're going to turn the heat up to medium and saute this for 3 to 4 minutes or until they're lightly browned. This process will help bring out some of the natural sugars in the apples, making this cabbage more delicious. Once they look just like this, we're going to add in our cabbage, season it up with a bit of coarse salt to again help draw out any moisture, and saute it for 2 to 3 minutes, moving it around the pan as best you can. I know it's full, but you can do it. And once you start to see some little brown marks on the cabbage, we're good to deglaze with 3/4 cup of dry red wine like Cabernet or Merlot. You could actually substitute with grape juice. We're going to cook it until there's about 2 tablespoons of the liquid left, which takes maybe only an additional 3 to 4 minutes. And then at this stage, we're going to add in our clove-stuffed onion, 2 bay leaves, 2 teaspoons of granulated sugar, 3 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, and then 2 cups of water. We're going to give it a quick stir, add on a lid, turn the heat down to low medium, and cook it for 30 minutes untouched. After that amount of time, we're going to come back and let it cook for an additional 20 to 25 minutes uncovered so that the cabbage can absorb more of that liquid and become more concentrated in flavor. So just coming back, and look what I found, our clove stuffed onion. It works. I'm telling you, it works. Remove that along with the bay leaves and then finish it with 2 tablespoons of currant jelly, or you could use regular grape jelly. Season it up with salt and pepper, give it a stir, and be sure to try this out. Cooking becomes much more enjoyable when you can eat throughout the entire process. So everything is finished, but mise en place is going to play a huge role if you want to create all of these things. You're not going to stop after cooking the schnitzel to start slicing mushrooms to make the sauce. No. And the cabbage, of course, you'll probably want to make that before. It will hold well over low heat while you make your schnitzel and your creamy mushroom sauce. And that's all part of those basic fundamental techniques, knowing when to start cooking and knowing when everything will be finished at the same time. You put it into practice over and over again, I promise you, your food's going to be incredible, and it will always make the best memories with all your friends and family around the table. All right, let me show you how I plate this up. Now, of course, you could serve all of these things separately, but let's put it all on one plate, beginning with a nice big scoop of that braised red cabbage. I'm going to next add on a perfectly golden brown pork schnitzel. Then I'm going to top off with some of that amazing creamy mushroom sauce, taking it from schnitzel to Jaeger Schnitzel. And for a little garnish, some fresh minced parsley. And I can't even begin to tell you how much my family loved this meal. Such big, bold flavors. And you know what? German cuisine is about that, and I'm here for it. I think if you give this a shot, you're really gonna dig it, and I hope your friends and family do as well. Now, if you wanna try another German dish, my beef rouladen recipe is a fan favorite. It's incredibly popular. The stuffing, the sauce, you will love it. Got a great recipe video. See you on there.